In this video, I'm going to graph the envelope portfolios using 5 stocks. And if you can do it with 5, you can follow the same pattern and do it with any number of assets, whether they're stocks or bonds or whatever the asset classes happen to be. So I've already calculated the covariance matrix and annualized it. And down here, control down, I have the returns annualized. And we did that in the previous video. But I want to see the returns right here. No real reason other than I just like to see the covariance matrix and the returns side by side. So I'm going to transpose this, and what I mean by transpose, like TR and tab, and I'll show you what I mean by transpose. Click over here somewhere, control down, and notice how the returns are all in one row. I want to make them into a column, just because that's the way I like to see them. So I close the parenthesis. Instead of hitting enter, I'm going to have control shift enter. So press control shift enter all at the same time, and then that should be your result. Those are the estimated returns. Now again, this is using historical data, so I don't know that those are correct because I need expectations, but nonetheless that's what I have. And now there's a video that will show you some of the finance behind this. If you haven't watched that video, you need to watch it, because I'm just going to show you how to do it without as much of an explanation of why. And so what I need to do is form 2 portfolios, portfolio X, let's call it, and then portfolio Y. Portfolio X is going to have some constant, and I just make up that constant, whatever it happens to be, and I'll format this as a percentage, 2 decimal places, and I'll say it's a 1%. So that's like the risk-free rate. So let's say a 1% risk-free rate. And I'm going to copy this, Control C and Control V. And then these are going to be my weights. And I just want to make things look good here. And this is going to be centered, underline, bold. And so the math I have to do, I need to find what is like the optimal risky portfolio if you had a 1% interest rate, risk-free rate. So to do that, I highlight all of these. I type equal matrix multiplier, so MM, and mmult is matrix multiplier, tab, and then M inverse, and that eventually comes up, tab. I'm going to take the inverse of this, and then close the parenthesis, comma, that's going to be multiplied by my returns, and my returns are in a column. So if that's okay, if they were in a row, I would have to transpose them, but they're in a column, so I don't have to. And then I subtract the risk-free rate and close the parenthesis and control shift enter. And these are not the right numbers, but it's a long formula, so I like to just make sure I have it in correctly like that for the numerator. And then the denominator, so divide, the denominator is the sum of the numerator. So I can just highlight the numerator and then control C, back over here, control V, and notice the parentheses are not closed. It's a green parenthesis. I need to put another one. It turns black. It must be the right one. Control shift enter. And those are the weights. This is the optimal risky portfolio if the risk-free rate were 1. There is no risk-free rate, but that doesn't matter. I'm saying if it were 1, that's what it would be. Alt equal, that should add to 100%, and it does. The negatives mean I've shorted the stock. So now we're allowing short sales. That's not always going to be the case. Okay, so here's portfolio X. So let me put that in bold and underline. Bold and italics. The fastest way to do portfolio Y is to copy this, Control C, come right here, copy, Control V for paste, and then change portfolio X to portfolio Y. And now all these give me value. They're all wrong because look what happened. I'm highlighting the wrong thing. When I copied it over, of course, the highlights went to the wrong place. So all I have to do is just drag the little colored lines here back to where they're supposed to be, and drag that one back to where it should be, that one back to where it should be, and then Control Shift Enter. And that should be the same numbers because I have a 1% and a 2%. 1 and 1, they're the same thing. Just change this to 3. And now this is the optimal risky portfolio if you have a 3% risk-free rate. Okay, so now essentially what I've done, I've combined all 5 stocks into 2 portfolios. And now that I have 2 portfolios, I can draw the envelope portfolios just like I did with 2 assets. So essentially we've taken the 5 assets and turned them into 2. So I need to know the expected return of X, and then I need to know the volatility. I'm just going to do the I'll call it volatility, or the standard deviation, whichever term you want to have. Volatility, standard deviation, the same thing. Well, the expected return is going to be the weights times the returns. I can do that 2 ways, and I'll do it both ways just to show it to you. And that's equal to matrix multiplication, so mult tab. And I want to multiply the weights times the returns, but the weights are in a column. I need to have them in a row, so transpose, highlight this, close the parenthesis, comma, and then multiply by the returns, close the parenthesis, Control Shift Enter. And then that's going to be my returns. And over here, my returns for Y, I can do the same thing, and just to prove it's the same, change that to 1%, so we have the same portfolio. I can use sum product, whichever one you want to do. So SUMP, sum product comes up, tab, and I want to take these weights and multiply by these returns, and I can just hit enter. I don't have to do Control Shift Enter. I have this in a percent format. So look, there are 2 ways to do it. I can do the matrix multiplication, which takes these weights times those returns, and in order to do that I have to transpose this one to make the matrices match up correctly. Or I could do sum product, which is going to be these weights times those returns. Change this back to 3%, and now we have 2 portfolios: the optimal risky with a portfolio with a risk-free rate of 1, and with a risk-free rate of 3%. So what about my volatility? Well, to get the volatility, instead of doing this volatility, I'm going to do this as a covariance matrix. So I want to have, I'll call this covariance matrix. So it'll look like what we've done before, and this is portfolio X, portfolio Y, this is portfolio X, portfolio Y, and then the covariance is going to be equal to mult. The weights, and these weights need to be transposed. Well, I need to multiply again actually, so I'm mult, and then I'm going to transpose these weights multiply by this covariance matrix. Make sure I close the parentheses when I need to, and comma, multiply by these weights again. Close the parenthesis, Control Shift Enter, and that is the variance of portfolio X. Well, I can copy this here, and that's the covariance of X and Y. I just have the cell references wrong. Copy to there by pressing Control V to paste, and I have the variance of Y, but I just have the cell references wrong. And it's much faster to do that copy rather than typing everything in again, and come back and just drag this to where it should be, and drag that one, Control Shift, this should be for portfolio Y, right? It should be for portfolio Y, Control Shift Enter. So this is the variance of Y, because the weights with the covariance matrix, and the variance of X, we have the weights of X with the covariance matrix. For Y, we have something very similar. The covariance of X and Y, I need one set of, I need to have one set of weights referencing portfolio Y, and the other set of weights, and it doesn't matter which is which, referencing portfolio X. Control Shift Enter, and let's make it look good. And now we have the variance of X, the variance of Y, the covariance of X and Y. So to graph this, come back over here, I'm going to have some amount of weight in portfolio X, some amount of weight in portfolio Y. Start with 1 for X, and then Y is equal to 1 minus whatever is in X. Well, I want to have 100 points on the graph, but I don't always want to graph from 1 to 0. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this well, let's do this kind of slow way. I could say this is equal to this minus 0.01. I can copy this down right here, copy both of these all the way down to 100 points, and it should be right there. And note that's really 0. It's just Excel's rounding issues. We don't have to deal with that. And just do this in number. So let's just stick with those weights, and I'll show you why I want to make a slight change to this in just a minute. So this would be the volatility of the portfolio, so the vol of the portfolio, and this would be the return of the portfolio. This is on the XY, this is X, this is Y. So the volatility will be the square root. So square root of the weight squared times the variance. Now this variance, this is the standard deviation squared is the variance, so I don't have to square it again. But I do want to lock it down because I'm going to copy this, plus the weight of y squared times the variance of y, which I don't have to square, plus 2 times the weight of each one of them times the covariance, which I need to lock down, and then hit enter, double click this down, and let's check and see if it looks right. So yeah, I'm still referencing the correct cell, so I think that's correct. And let's look at the return. It's equal to the weight of x times the return on x, and lock that down, plus the weight in y times the return on y, and lock that down, double click. Let's put this in percentage for both of them, and then let's go ahead and graph this. So insert a scatter graph, and I have something bad here at the bottom. Okay, so let's look and see. Get rid of this. Highlight all of this, make sure I have the right things highlighted, and then pull this back up to the top, insert my scatter graph, and I'm just going to get rid of this. I'm not going to clean up the graph with labels and everything now. I don't want to waste the time. Just move this over here to take a look at it. And that's not the curved line you would expect. So what's wrong? Well, what happened? Our graph is from a return of 29.3 to 32.5, so this is really a close-up of that larger curved line. So I want to have a bigger view of the line. So what do? Well, I would like to graph this instead of way of 1 and 0, maybe 2 and -1. So I could do 2 and -1, but my step size is still 0.01. So what I really want to do is change the step size of the graph. So I'm going to say this is equal to, and what would the step be? Well, I want to go a distance of 1, and I'm going to lock that down, F4 minus 0, close parenthesis, and I want to go a distance of 100. And if this were 2 and 1, I'm going a distance of 300 points between 2 and -1. So my step size, if I want to go a total distance of 100 steps, and think of 1 as 100 steps, if I want to go a distance of 100 steps and take 100 steps, I divide by 100. So that brings me down by 0.01. If this is 2, I have 300 steps to go, and the step size is 0.03. So what I need to have is where I was before minus my step size. Copy that down. See what I've done? I start at 2, and I'm going all the way down to -1 and 2 because this was 2 and -1. This is 1 and 0. It goes to 0 and 1. If this were 3 and -2, -2 and 3. So it continues to go like that, and it gives me different views of the graph. As I make this bigger and bigger, you see how the graph starts to curve, and now I have a better view of the entire graph. And that's the graph, and that's where I want to stop with this particular video.